I trust our good friend Scott Bischoff for all our NFL draft content, which he is joining the program. Welcome to the show, Scott Bischoff. The man,
what's up, guys?
Legend. Find new legends. Find other people.
Detroit Lions NFL draft analyst, of course, at DetroitLionsPodcast.com and staff writer at FootballGuys.com. Scott Bischoff did a lot of great work. I was at our former employer covering the draft. Scott, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm happy to be on with you guys.
We're fired up, cool. Scott. I mean, it's off-season talk, which, I like to be celebrating a Super Bowl, but it's here nor there. But we get to get to the off-season. We get to cover the NFL draft. I thought, who else to bring on but the Scott Bischoff? So I want to ask you, I know you've been doing a lot of homework and just kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of things and looking at prospects. Because I know the obvious discussion was who should the Lions take and what's the best position group they should target. But I'll ask you, is there anybody that stood out to you that maybe others haven't been speaking of, a specific player that you see could be a good fit for the Detroit Lions, like someone that is kind of off the radar?
Mason McCormick from South Dakota State would be an off the radar player in like round 3. He is obviously a small school, but he's a dude. Interior offensive lineman. He can play guard. He can play center. He was at the Shrine game 2 weeks ago. He just screams. He screams kind of what the Lions look for in players. Go find videos of him. He's a really good football player who I think would step in right away and play, but would give you some versatility to handle either guard position or potentially play center at a high level for you. I know that's a deeper name, but he is a guy I think is going to rise in the process because he's a really polished player and he's a fun player to watch. He's super athletic. So South Dakota State uses him in a lot of ways. They'll leave him on like the backside of a play and then pull him out in front of a screen pass. And he's a center and he's able to do it. And it's just fun to watch. Love so that. He's one of those guys. Trying to think of it's all dependent on what they do in free agency. That I'm sure we were going to get there. I probably jumped the gun on that one, but
no, you're good.
McCormick is a guy I would say the Lions should be looking at, and I would it would be awesome if he became a Lion because he would help them for a long time and add some athleticism. If you look at around the league, you look at really good run games. Generally speaking, they all have good centers, athletic centers, and I know the Lions have a center. They have an elite center, but he's kind of broken down, and it's getting to the point where there was some questions even this year at the end of the season. Is he coming back or what's the deal? I would love to solidify that, for now and going into the future. I think that's smart. So that's a name.
Yeah, we're all for offensive linemen.
Yeah. I love that. Offensive lineman, 3rd round. Scott, my name is Booner, by the way, too. It's nice to meet you. I don't think we ever met officially. I've heard a lot about you, a lot of good things. So appreciate you joining the show. I wanted to ask you quick
telling stories.
Yeah. Good thing. So I want to tell you a quick draft question here for you. And I talked about this with Nick Faber over at Honolulu Blues, and he brought it up. But obviously drafts in Detroit here, and Brad Holmes, he's been very notorious of like trading up the last few years. And this year being at 29, it's like, what is he going to do? Is he going to stay, trade up, trade back? Do you and I'm sure you have a really good feel already of like what position groups they're looking for, which ones are deeper here in this draft. Do you see Brad moving back or moving up at all in this draft, or just staying at 29, taking a guy that he likes and kind of moving on to the 2nd round?
It's a great question. There is no answer for it because he's done it all. He's moved up. He's moved back. The one thing that not a lot of people are talking about is utilizing picks to go get an established player. Right. Like, the Rams did that for Jalen Ramsey a few years ago. They gave up multiple firsts. They did it before then for Brandon Cooks. Same thing. So there's not a lot of fear to use, some of the assets they have to go get an established player who can help you now. And to me, looking at that window that they have, and who knows how long that window is, I would want them to be competing right now. Let's say, a perfect world scenario falls to them and Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo, the cornerback, is available at 29. That's a great pick. We would all love that. But is he really stepping in year one and playing to a level that, where you're comfortable playing him, and I would say it's kind of unlikely. You know what I mean? So if they're gonna push their chips in, maybe you make a play for an established corner or an edge rusher, kind of a player who really helps you a lot in year one. And I know that doesn't answer your question, but it's a good question. There's no great answer for it. I could see them doing everything you said.
That's an interesting side to it. Didn't even think about going out and getting an established guy in the league.
I know you like that, Lucas. We love that too.
Yeah, Scott, we've had heated discussions on here about that. You're speaking my language when you say that. But you brought up free agency, and you're going right into what I was going to ask. And this is kind of to Jeff's point. Yeah, we all see the Josh Allens, the Brian Burns, the Danielle Hunters of the world in free agency, but I don't think any of us see Brad Holmes going out in free agency and spending that type of money. To your point, maybe in the free agency timeline, he goes out and makes a trade. But who are some true signings that you think Brad will get on a good bargain and that will make an impact on this roster if they join?
Well, I mean, I think they have to address their own guys first. And to me, those guys are Graham Glasgow is a huge part of this. He played really well last year. And with the current makeup of, what they have as a backup center, I think it's almost a no-brainer to bring him back. They have a decision to make with Jonah Jackson. I don't know what they're going to do there. I could see them letting him walk away if he really was going to chase a lot of money. I could see them, thinking they could just replicate, the production of a guard, say in round 2 or 3. Josh Reynolds is another one. I'm not sure what they're going to do with him. It struck me listening to Dan Campbell talk after the season about how some of the players that they may have emotional ties to, they might have to walk away from. Reynolds to me is one of those guys where, he really helped Goff turn things around in Detroit. He was a reliable player for him in LA. I think you got to look at the drops in the playoffs and question it. I think it's 6 drops and 36 targets. It's not a good drop rate. So, I mean, that's, but that's going to inform what they do in the draft. If you don't bring back Reynolds, then obviously you have a need. Assuming that Antoine Green isn't going to step into that role, you have a need. This is a great draft if you need a receiver. This is a great draft if you need an offensive lineman. It's an interesting draft for quarterbacks at the top of the class, but there are some positions where it's a really good draft. There are some others where it's not, not so much. So, and then on the defensive side of the ball, James Houston, I think it's, would you want to bring him back? I would. It's not that long ago. He was a pretty lethal pass rusher in his moments, right? And then, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson Jr., to me, I think you bring him back if you can get him back at a reasonable price. And then a player that I don't know who I thought was great at the end of the season was Jalen Reeves-Maybin as their coverage linebacker. He's really, really good. So I'd like them to bring him back too. And then outside of that, I mean, one of the ways that Holmes can handle the cornerback issue, and there is an issue, and I would think looking at this roster, edge rusher and cornerback are the most pressing needs. Kansas City has 2 cornerbacks. I don't think they're going to be able to sign both of them. I would be totally satisfied with either one of them. But you're going to have to pay a lot of money for that. Jalen Johnson's another one. So the Kansas City guys are L'Jarius Sneed and Trent McDuffie. But it's a good point that you make about not going out and paying premium money really anywhere. But, right now I think the Lions are considered, a top 5 team in the NFL. And if you go out and if Holmes really thinks that, going out and signing a premium corner to a good contract would make some sense, which would allow them to hit the edge position in the draft and just kind of fill it out from there.
Yeah, and Scott, thanks for joining us again. And kind of like you alluded to right there, this is a loaded wide receiver class. You've seen kind of mock drafts like our friends at Honolulu Blues drafted one in the first round and people went ape shit. Is there any way that you could see Brad Holmes possibly making that surprise pick and maybe taking a wide receiver in the first round or maybe even in the second round? You got 2 second-round picks. So is there any chance that the Lions go out and grab a wide receiver in this draft? And if so, who would that be, do you think?
So if you asked me last year if I could see them taking a running back and a linebacker in the first round,
right. That's a good point.
So I don't think any of us are in a position to say what they think or what they know Brad Holmes will do. We don't. So, I mean, if you're saying if everything resolves itself with their offensive line, which is a very important part of Goff's game, and in some way, shape, or form, or they've gone out and they've got Danielle Hunter on a cheaper contract, and whatever. I don't know what's gonna happen in free agency, but if a player that they really like as a receiver is there at pick 29, yeah, I could see him making that pick if they really like a player like Keon Coleman, a big-bodied, pretty, a guy who's a good route runner. I think that's the thing that should guide our thought process with receivers, is they need to be reliable route runners. Jared Goff has told you and he's shown us in his play that wide receivers who are reliable with the way they run routes, he likes those guys and he will get the ball to them. Wide receivers who are not going to work so much. So to me, looking at this class, I think Roman Wilson from Michigan screams Detroit Lion. His backstory, the amount of travel he had to. Yeah, we're going to talk about Lab McConkey. Yeah. Roman Wilson screams Detroit Lion. It's just, are you doing that early? To me, that's a second-round pick, and I could, is that a scenario where he trades up? Maybe, maybe that's something that could happen. Lad McConkey is just one of those guys where he's always open. He's going to be open, and he is the definition of what I just said about Jared Goff's preference for reliability and trust out of the receiver position. And he is that guy. Yeah, for sure. Troy Franklin from Oregon's another one. I think he's a, bigger body player too, but all those guys, I think, I don't think they're round one guys. I mean, I think Franklin is, but like for the Lions, but if the Lions are going to do something like that, I could see it being any of those guys, which would be a fascinating thing. But, a player like McConkey, playing on the outside, the reliability of what he does, adding things to their offense that's already super explosive, sign me up, right? But there's other things that they have to resolve before we get to that, And yes, I'm sure people did lose their minds about, the idea of adding a receiver. I'm sure they did.
And Scott too, like we've been having the conversation just about the cornerbacks in this draft, and for me, and obviously you dive into the tape. Tape doesn't lie. How would you rank the corners in this draft? I hear Arnold, the corner out of Alabama, who played with Kool-Aid McKinstry. Some have him as the number one corner. Some talk about Quinyon Mitchell. I like Kool-Aid McKinstry. Where would you kind of rank the corners, and who's a guy out of the cornerback group that you think stands out the most, and a guy that could potentially be there at 29 you like for the Lions?
So, if we're talking about a guy that's going to be there at 29, I think at this point in the process, it's probably McKinstry. And I like his fit with Detroit because of the press man stuff, the physicality. I think both of the other guys will be gone. Mitchell's very interesting. He's very productive. Lots of he's tough. He's a very sticky corner. It's hard though, because the Lions are going to ask. They're going to ask the cornerbacks that they're looking at to do maybe different things than they did in college. So a lot of that is, the physicality of how they play when they turn their hips. Do you want them to press? Do you want them to press bail? Do you want them in man or off man kind of stuff? So, it's I think there's a bunch of guys. There's a bunch of corners who fit, and it's a good class of corners. Just I think there's a lot of questions right now as to who the top one is. But, yeah, for me, it's Quinyon Mitchell's in that range. Kamari Lassiter from Georgia, I think fits for what they do. Even though he's a little wiry, he still fits because he's very physical. Ennis Rakestraw from Missouri is another one. He missed the Senior Bowl. He had a core muscle surgery, which is always a little bit of a spooky thing, but I think those are getting a little easier to overcome as time has gone on. Those guys, I think, are your round one guys. But again, if you're drafting one of those guys, I think you better have a backup plan in place, because sometimes it's tough to see those guys, especially that late in round one, just, hey, go ahead and play and start for us. It's not that easy. You know what I mean? So,
Right.
yeah, I mean, I think McKinstry would be a really nice fit if that's where they ended up in round one. The other need that we haven't talked about, and it's a bit of a backwards way to look at it, but it's forward thinking, is tackle.
Mhm.
And with Taylor Decker getting a little older, is there a prospect in this class that you would draft and play as a guard, and then allow them to kind of the flexibility of kicking players out and playing them as tackles? Because I think one of the ways that the Mason McCormick thing is he's an inside out player, like he's a guard center or a center guard. And then there's the idea of, is there a guy who played tackle in college who could start for you as a guard for a year or two and then play tackle? And yeah, there is. And it's BYU tackle Kingsley Suamataia. And he's a fascinating prospect. He is Penei Sewell's cousin. If that, I don't know if that sells you on him.
Sign me up. Sign me up.
I'd love to hear that.
There's a lot of that in his game. You can see it. So, and he's a little shorter. He's like 6'4.5". He's got 34+ inch arms. He's crazy athletic. He could do everything that you could possibly want. But in the future, when they move on from Decker, Penei Sewell's your left tackle, and he would be your right tackle. And it's just a way to kind of solve a current issue as a guard with the guard position, while potentially solving the tackle issue in the future. Whether they think about things like that or not, I don't know. But it's just that's another. I would imagine if you mocked a tackle who's going to play guard for you in round one, people would lose their minds over it. So, but it's something to think about.
Yeah, it feels like, Scott, whenever Lions fans lose their minds, typically it works out the last couple of years. So if they lose their minds, at the end of the day, I think we'll be all right. Before we get you out of here, I want to ask you, because this is something we talk a lot about on the show, is JJ McCarthy and where a situation fits best. Joe Klatt had him mocked.
That is great.
No, I'm excited because this will kind of solve the debate a little bit, because we go back and forth with some friends of ours about where JJ ranks. You see it's like fluctuating, right? He's one of the best quarterback prospects in the class, and then you see guys where it's like, well, he needs more work. He could be a guy that you take in the second round. And I know Joe Klatt brought up Seattle because of the Mike McDonald connection. What's been your evaluation of JJ? And I know the NFL goes after potential. Is he a first round pick to you?
Oh,
Scott?
yeah. Oh,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's why I the heavy sigh, because I know I'm going to step into a pile. Can I swear?
Yeah.
I'm going to step into some shit here with him. So there's enough in his game, and he's got enough of that kind of fuck you mentality.
Yeah.
And there's enough of those kind of throws on his film where he reminds me, and only in this regard, he reminds me of Joe Burrow, like that, where, Burrow got kind of slept on a little bit, and then he blew up at LSU. And then even in the NFL, he'll make these throws that are just like, man, that took balls. And McCarthy does that a lot. Like, his film is littered with those kind of throws. So in that mentality, he does remind me of Burrow. The wiry frame. I think he's more athletic than Burrow. I think he's going to be, 6'2" and he's going to be around 210 pounds. He's going to run. My guess is he's going to run 4.5. With him, it's the off the field stuff that's really, really good with him. The leadership, the winning matters more than anything else. I think some people are going to knock him for his lack of production, but generally speaking, games were over in the third quarter his entire career at Michigan. So, again, I think there's enough throws on film where if you're looking at just, the throw itself, there's a lot of that. And then just comparing him to like Drake May and Jaden Daniels, and, I think there are more questions with those guys, even though Daniels had more production. McCarthy's got some intangibles that you can't teach. And then it's the poise and the understanding of what defenses are trying to do. I would tell you to investigate. I don't know if you guys remember the throw against Michigan State to Colston Loveland where he zipped the ball by the linebacker's ear.
Mhm.
That's a throw that he asked them to put in because he was recognizing Michigan State's linebacker turning late, and he thought he could fit the ball into that window. And so just the processing and the understanding of what defenses try to do his stuff is off the charts. So I think he's going to rise in the process. I think he could put on a show at the combine. He's got plenty of arm. He does everything on the move. It's, do I think he should surpass Caleb Williams? No, but I think he should be in range after that to challenge those other guys easily. And I realize I know, but that's where I am with them. So
yeah. And that's fair. I want to ask you, Scott. Can you stick around till 9:00? Is that fine with you? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. All right, cool. I
Love it.
respect your time. All right, boys.
Oh,
You
yeah.
got anything for him?
I've got something else here, and I love the JJ thing. Love that. I love to
Great.
hear that because I've been the one that I've been on the first round thing with JJ. Want to ask you this though, Scott, too, real quick. Obviously, a need for the Lions right now, or at least kind of a depth thing, is the defensive end. And we did just have this conversation before you hopped on here about the DNs. And when we talked to Nick from Honolulu Blues, he was down at the Senior Bowl, and he mentioned that he might feel like that this is not as deep of a defensive end class. Do you see the Detroit Lions kind of attacking that in free agency and going to get like a big time D end kind of on the other side of Aiden Hutchinson to complement him, or do you see them addressing this early in the draft within the first couple rounds?
I think they could do either. It is not a great defensive end class. Darius Robinson from Missouri, I think, fits the bill for what the Lions do. He is not a speedy, bendy guy, though. He's more of a physical squeeze defender, but it would work. After that, it's not like there's any guarantees or anything that's really, sometimes, the classes are better. This is not a great defensive end class. So I think Chris Braswell from Alabama is intriguing, although he's got a strange body. So I think he's more of a stand-up edge rusher. He might be more of a fit as a 3-4 outside linebacker type guy, but I think he can play. But I think Darius Robinson with the arm length and the size at like 6'5" and 280 pounds, opposite Hutchinson would intrigue me a lot. Again, more of as a squeeze defender, but if you're telling me they're gonna fix the edge position with a player like Danielle Hunter in free agency and then attack corner in the draft, I'd be for that too. There's a million ways they could do this.
Yeah, Scott, I know we're talking about off-season stuff, but something that led us into the off-season, in my opinion, was that third quarter, and specifically with Ben Johnson, and you can blame it on whether it was his fault or the offense's fault just coming out slow. But I feel like that third quarter for the Detroit Lions, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, was really like people called it the turd quarter. So what do you think they need to do with either personnel or coaching-wise? Because I think if they do that, that'll solve a lot of their problems. What do you think they need to do in order to correct that?
I have no idea.
Lions would hire you, Scott, if you knew.
Hey, I don't know. I think there are things that work for them. There are things that don't. It did seem like they struggled in the third quarter at times. I wonder at times if they felt obligated to get, each running back a certain number of touches when maybe, riding the hot hand may have been a better approach. There was also situations where they needed to throw more, let's say on first down when they weren't. But it's a good question. I don't have a great answer. I just don't. It's above. It's a good question. I don't have an answer.
Sorry. Hey, that's fair. None of us do. That's why I figured if any of us were to have some type of answer, it'd be you. But no, that's fair. I'd rather be like, hey, I have no clue than
not a clue.
Kind of going back to the draft, Scott, obviously the Lions have lots of needs, defensive edge, corner, offensive line. Is there any position that you could definitely see them doubling up on and kind of ensuring on some depth? And like you said, with the offensive line, kind of getting a pillar there and kind of letting a guy grow for, a guy like Taylor Decker that is on his way out eventually.
Yeah, I mean, I could see them taking. I could see them taking an interior offensive lineman that has some versatility. I could see that. I could also see them taking a swing player. But I mean, I think if they're going to double up, it probably would be, my guess, it would be at the corner position. With say like Kool-Aid McKinstry in round 1. And then, maybe a guy like Chris Abrams-Drain, or somebody like that, and say round 3 or 4. He's from Missouri too. I could see just, it's just kind of adding talent to a position and kind of hoping that you hit on one of them. But, he's done those kind of, I mean, he did it with the tackles early in his first draft. He did it with the edge players in his second draft, so yeah, I mean, I could see him doing it. It's just, to me, their needs are exactly what you mentioned. It's O-line, edge, corner. And if the board falls a certain way, they have no fear of taking, 2 players at the same position. I don't think it matters to them. So yeah, I could see him doing it.
I want to, before we get you out of here, Scott, I want to ask, because this is another conversation we have that relates to the NFL draft. It's what the Bears should do at 1. And I think by what you've said, I think I know what way you're going to go, but the conversation is Fields versus Caleb. Should they keep Fields versus draft Caleb? I'm a huge Caleb guy, and I think there's a lot of teams right now that would take Caleb over who they have at quarterback a lot more than people think. What's been your evaluation of Caleb Williams? I've heard also he's the next Ryan Leaf, so there's like 2 drastic, like different angles on this. Where are you at with Caleb? And if you were the Bears GM, if you're Ryan Poles, how would you approach this?
I would draft Caleb Williams and make sure that the situation around the coaching was a little more static than what Justin Fields has had, because Fields is going into year 4 coming up?
Yep.
He's had 3 different offensive coordinators. I don't think they've given Matt Eberflus a real vote of confidence for this coming offseason or this coming season. So if they struggle a little bit, I could see them firing him. So then, I mean, if you're keeping Justin Fields and potentially firing the coach, it's going to be 4 coordinators in 5 years and 4 different offenses in 5 years for Fields. And it's like, it's so unfair, and it's hard. It would be so difficult to judge, a quarterback based on all those things. But then I look at, his progression as a player, and outside of targeting DJ Moore and Cole Kmet, he wasn't very good. And you need to run with him a lot for the offense to go. And, running quarterback, it's just a matter of time before they start to get hurt. And right. then you have to rely upon your ability to move the chains, throwing the ball. And there's still, even into year 4, there's questions about his ability to do that, consistently. So if it were me, I'm glad it's not, because I don't want to lose a job and have to move my family and all that stuff for one decision. But, I would be drafting Caleb Williams, getting as much as I could for Justin Fields, and maybe with that second pick, adding a receiver, maybe a Romo Duns player with the 9th pick that they have. I think that'd be nice with DJ Moore to pair with Caleb Williams going forward. But that's just the way I would do it. I mean, I might even look at taking a left tackle there, to protect the quarterback. But, I don't envy the Bears in that decision, because, it's a tough decision. But, I think, and then the other part of it is, what are you going to get for Justin Fields? Right. What is the team going to give up for him? And I've seen anywhere from, a first round pick to, a couple of day 2 picks. And it's like, nobody really knows yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's fair. Good stuff, Scott. We appreciate you. For all that aren't familiar, you can check Scott's stuff out. Detroit Lions NFL draft analyst at DetroitLionsPodcast.com. He's also a staff writer at FootballGuys.com. Former Scout, Scott, we'll talk to you very soon. I appreciate you for taking the time. We all do.
Sounds good. I look forward to joining you guys again. It was fun. Thanks,
appreciate
guys.
it, Scott. Thank you.
You guys.
Great stuff.
There you have it. Mr. Scott Bischoff, man, he's good.
Great.
That
was awesome.
Great.
I love getting perspective of people like a guy like Scott, who's very experienced in the industry, and like heading into a new draft, hearing what a guy like his thoughts are. heading into the draft. And hopefully we can get him on a couple more times even before the draft, so we can just keep kind of learning and learning. I don't know. I think it's interesting to hear his point of view.